All right, I'm going to go ahead and officially start this presentation. My name is Matthew Barlow. I've been with Earthworks for 13 years. I manage the garden center, and I am a true, I'll admit that I'm a plant geek. I just love plants, okay? And it all started with an orchid. I was buying an orchid as a gift for a friend. I went to this greenhouse when I was living in Houston, and I walked in, and I was instantly like, I caught the bug, like the plant bug. I saw all these exotic plants, and I ended up leaving with like 10, like 9 for me and 1 for her. And I have been like crazy about plants ever since. So fortunately, the internet was around at the time, and I started doing research on orchids. And the more I learned about them, the more geeked out I got. And then that just kind of trickled into all different types of plants. I just couldn't get enough information. And then when I moved to the South, and purchased my first home here, I kind of want to do like an homage to my mother, who always had a vegetable garden in the backyard. You know, growing up, she had a big plot in the backyard, and my brother and I would always help her. And I always kind of enjoyed that, and enjoyed it, especially reaping the benefits of my mom's work and growing the vegetables. We always loved it. So my mom would make, she would have lots of cucumbers every year, and she always made homemade pickles. And I could eat my weight as a kid in pickles. Like, she would have to actually like dole them out. Like, we weren't allowed to like raid the pantry. Like, she literally had to dole them out, 'cause my brother and I would have eaten everything in the first week, like literally. So I just had all these great memories, you know, growing up, and my mom growing food. And I remember she had, like, we had a chain link fence, and she had cucumbers growing all over the chain link fence, and she used that vertical space, you know, and then she used the actual plot for all kinds of other more bushy type vegetables. And so I moved to Florida. I was like, man, we got this, it's warm all year round. We should be able to grow food all year round. And so doggone it, I'm going to go to Home Depot, and I'm going to rent a sod cutter, and I'm going to get a rototiller, because where I grew up in Indiana, we had clay soil, right? So my mom would have a friend bring a rototiller over. We'd till it up every year. So I went to the Home Depot. I rented a truck. I got the ramp so I could get the machines on and off. And I had these 2 big machines, and I cut this 20 by 20 square, this big patch out of my backyard. And I was so excited, like, all right. But it took me like half a day, because I had to cut all the sod, then I had to stack it up, drag it to the front yard, you know, in little piles, so that the yard guys, you know, could pick it up and take it away on yard waste day. And so I was pretty tired, but, you know, I was like super motivated. I was super excited. So then went to the truck. I got the rototiller down, and went to the backyard to the big square that I'd made with the sod cutter. And it dawned on me that things were a lot different. Okay, I'd actually stopped and paused for a moment and looked at what I had revealed underneath the sod, and it was sand. Okay, so that was my first rude awakening. So I said, you know, this rototiller is pretty much useless. I'm not going to need to chunk up anything. I mean, it's all soft. Like, you can just take it, right? And it's just like loose. And so put the machines back on. I returned the machines, come back, and I had bought all these vegetables on my second trip at the Home Depot or Lowe's. I can't remember which one it was. Bought all these fertilizers, bought all this like black cow and all this stuff. Didn't buy enough black cow, because it was a 20 by 20. I bought like maybe 2 or 3 bags, and this is like 20 by 20, like giant gaping hole now in my backyard. And I was still super motivated, so I tried to sprinkle out the black cow. I literally had no idea what I was doing. All I knew is that I wanted to do what my mom did, but I did no research, no nothing, which I think is probably typical male. I just jumped right in there without really thinking about it. It was like all passion and no brain. And so I had all these like little 4-inch cups. I had bought a whole bunch, but didn't buy enough to fill a 20 by 20 area. You know, I got a couple trays, and so like I had this small little like square within the square, and there's still like all this open area. I was like, oh my God, like I didn't realize like how many plants it would take to fill that area up. And so I just had this small little area, and so I planted them all in, and I watered them, and then I walked away. And I came out the next day and I watered them, and then maybe the third day I watered them. But after like a week or 2, you know, you get busy and life takes over. And I remember going out one day and everything was dead. I mean, it just like took me by surprise. I was so like ignorant. And so my first attempt was really an eye-opener that I needed to learn a little bit, and to take some time, and to rethink how I'm going to do this, if I'm going to do it successfully. So I ended up having to buy some sod, and I covered up most of the area that I had stripped. And I just kept that little small area. And I tried a few different times. The first thing that I didn't realize was that the soil here is just, it's sand. It's not conducive to growing especially vegetables and herbs, very well. Okay, there are maybe a few exceptions to that. There's like rosemary doesn't care; it likes our sandy soil. It's pretty tolerant of the poor soil. But most of our vegetables need something dark, something rich, something that looks like compost. Okay, something that smells like earth. Like when you go into the woods and you scrape off the leaves and you kind of get that top layer of soil, that nice dark rich smell. That's what you want the soil to smell like, to feel like, if you're growing edibles. Okay, so you can scale this however you want. You can do them in containers. Okay, you can grow vegetables successfully in a container like this size. Okay, it's like a 15-gallon pot. I've even done them in 7-gallon pots, which is one size down from that. But the most important thing is the soil. It really is the soil. And a lot of times we don't focus on the soil, we focus on other things, or we don't even think about the soil. But the soil is where it all begins. And if you don't have good soil, then everything else is going to be an uphill battle with growing vegetables. So the soil is one of the most important things. And then the second thing is timing. And I apologize, I forgot to print out the calendar, but I'm going to make sure you guys all get a planting calendar before you go. So this is a calendar that is based on planting seeds month by month, and kind of like the ideal time to be starting seeds. Now keep in mind that once you have this, it's kind of a rule of thumb, all right? So if you have lived here long enough, you know that our seasons and our months are not always exactly the same, okay? And the most difficult thing to growing vegetables here is the transitions. So it's the transitions coming out of winter and then going back into winter, and the timing of when to get things in the ground. A lot of it has to do with temperatures, like the actual temperatures, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we get further along. But growing in containers and spiting off a little bit at a time is what I found was the easiest, okay? So I started growing things in pots and containers, and I started using potting soil. Potting soil is ideal because potting soil has been formulated by really smart people to grow things really well in containers. It's formulated for that. So I mean, if you just dump a bunch of black cow in a container, you can have some success, but you might have mixed results, okay? And there's a lot of reasons behind that. But this type of texture, the weight of it, the formulation is conducive to growing pretty much any plant successfully. I mean, this is a very good start. So not necessarily just a happy frog, but any premium potting soil. Now, if you notice over where I have all my soils, you notice that the potting soils, barring one, are all going to be Fox Farm. And I have experimented over the years, and I've tried all different kinds, and the success rates I've had with the Fox Farm has been the best, which is why I don't carry 10 different types of potting soil, because I've kind of narrowed it down with experience firsthand, and I've found that the Fox Farm brands are going to do you really well. So for an overall, if you're just doing a small vegetable garden or a small herb garden, I would invest in the Happy Frog. It's a good general purpose for growing just about anything. It's a big bag, you can fill up a big pot, and you can have really good germination rates if you're starting seedlings in it as well, or if you have our seeds, or you'll have really good success if you're starting with small plants. Okay, so either way, whether you're starting with seed or if you're starting with small plants. If you're considering doing a raised bed, like a veggie box, I say do it. It's awesome, it's fun, it allows you a little more flexibility with what you can grow, because sometimes in a pot or a container it can be a little limiting, right? So if you are considering doing a raised bed, I would consider just doing one 4x8 or maybe two 4x8 boxes, okay, if you have the space for it. And I would say one, maybe two, just depending on how much time you want to allow for it. Having two boxes is not a lot more work than having one. You have to scale up considerably before it becomes a lot more time consuming, a lot more work. At one point, I had almost my entire backyard. I had about 1,200 square feet in production, so I kind of had a small urban farm in my backyard at one point. And it was, at that point, kind of like a part-time job. I'd come home at night and I had a lot of work to do to maintain those beds. But if you're doing a 4x8 or two 4x8s, a few hours a week, it's pretty easy to maintain. So like on a weekend, a little bit of check-in, after work in the evenings, is pretty easy to do that, because the watering and the interaction with the plants on a daily basis is important, because you're going to be able to catch things if things are starting to go in a direction you don't want them to. So let me talk about the 4x8 bed. So a 4x8 bed I would do at 12 inches deep. So 12 inches is pretty much ideal to grow pretty much any vegetable, any herb in. So most of the root system, because these plants are annual plants, so they're plants that generally don't live for more than 1 year, even in nature. They're a crop, that gets changed out. You do 2 different crops in that bed a year. So the roots aren't going to be like a tree or a big bush to where they're needing to grow really deep and really wide. So 12 inches is generally very sufficient for that. So if you are going to do a 4x8 bed, you would do it 12 inches deep. You would need three pieces of the lumber and then 1 4x4 post. Okay, so the way that I would build these would be 3 of the 2-inch by 12-inch by 8 feet long. Okay, so you have your 2 8-foot sides on the 2 boards. Then your 3rd board you cut in half, so those are your 2 4-foot ends. Okay, simple 3 pieces of wood. And then your 4x4 post you cut into 4 2-foot sections. 1 foot below ground in each corner and 1 foot above ground, so you can zip in or nail in the post to the wood. Okay, so it's a pretty quick, fairly inexpensive start to doing a raised bed. Most people can do it in a few hours if you have the saw to do it. If not, borrowing a saw or whatever you need to do is going to be crucial. But once you have the basic equipment to actually zip it together, it doesn't take very long to do. And even if you don't get it perfect, as long as the boards are either nailed or screwed together, it's going to hold the dirt. That's what's most important, okay? So as long as you can contain the dirt, you're doing good. So even if you have to use zip ties or duct tape, I don't care. But if you can hold the wood together, you're off to a good start. So then filling a bed of that size, you wouldn't want to necessarily use potting soil unless you have a really large budget for this, because it'd be more expensive to do it with potting soil. So at this point, you'd want to use a bulk soil. So we do sell a bulk soil here. You can get it by the scoop from our tractor. If you have a pickup truck or borrow a pickup truck or rent a pickup truck, we can load that up for you. We could also have it delivered to you as well, because we do have a dump truck to where we can deliver that. But usually it's not as cost effective to have us deliver it, because I think the delivery fee is actually a little bit more than the soil itself. So if you can borrow, beg, steal a pickup truck, that's usually the best way to do that. So 1 scoop will fill that 4x8. So the measurement is 1 cubic yard. Okay, 1 cubic yard of soil will fill 1 4x8 by 12-inch box. And that's kind of why I espouse and I recommend the 4x8 box, because it's very simple. It's 1 scoop of dirt, 3 boards, 1 post. It's a pretty simple process to get up and started. And that 4x8 box will allow you to grow a considerable amount of food, okay? Especially if you're getting started. You'll be surprised at how many things you can grow in that 4x8, that 32 square feet. Now once you have the dirt in there, it's really important to feed the soil. So a lot of times we don't think about feeding soil, we think more about feeding plants. But the soil is where the nutrients need to be for most of the time, because the plants are going to get the nutrients out when they need it, right? So if we put the nutrients in the soil and we're not, the plants aren't relying on us to be going out there and trying to guess as to when they need the nutrients, then the plant can get the nutrients when it needs it, because it's going to be already there. So I do organic. You guys can use conventional methods or organic methods. You'll have good success with both. Organic gardening is not more difficult. There are specific challenges because you're not using chemicals. So we'll talk about pests and diseases later. But I choose to go organic, and so I start with this product here for several different reasons. One, you can hear it's like a dry food, right? So you put this dry food, you mix it into that bed. I think you're only going to use no more than probably 1/3 of this bag for your first feeding. And you could actually technically put the whole bag in there if you wanted to, because you're not going to hurt the plants, because if you're using organic, slow release like this, it's not going to hurt the plants, even if you just dump the whole thing in there. But I think generally about a 1/3 to a half of this would be all you would need to do in that 4x8 bed. It's a slow release, so it's in a granular, dry form. But the most exciting thing about this product is that it's more than just a plant food. There's actually living microbiology in here, so they're putting beneficial bacterium in here, and I'll explain what they do. And they're also putting mycorrhizae in here. So mycorrhizae is a beneficial fungus, and it occurs in nature. It doesn't make a mushroom, but what it does is it creates a spider web of these threads in the soil that connect the root systems of plants. It helps the transfer of nutrients from one plant to another sometimes when needed, and also moisture. It gives the root system of the plants a larger surface area too, so they can be more efficient at their uptake of nutrients and their uptake of moisture. And it also gives them just a slight coating around them, so that can actually help the plants at the root level resist certain types of soil-borne diseases. So there's a lot of benefits to the mycorrhizae. So the bacteria and the mycorrhizae in this dry form are inert, or they're sleeping, or they're at rest. Once they come in contact with water and the roots, they're going to spring back to life. So I talked a little bit about what the mycorrhizae does. So what the bacteria does is in nature, these type, oh, there goes everything. What the bacteria do in nature and what they'll do in your soil is they break down the organic matter, okay? So for example, the bulk mix that we sell has a lot of organic matter in there. It has a lot of crushed pine and some chunky bits of nutrient in there. And the bacterium are going to break that down to a smaller form. So even if you're to pull out like one of these little nuggets in there, if you're to look at a root and look at that nugget, you can see that root can't pull that whole nugget into itself, right? It's got to be in a smaller form. And it's almost like on the molecular level. So the food's got to break down to a point to where the root can actually absorb it. So these bacterium will help break that down and allow the plants to absorb that much quicker, okay? So it's a great way to kind of add this diversity of this micro. It's almost like having beneficial gut flora in a way, but for the plants. So it's having that microbiology, that flora in there, and so it makes a more of an ecosystem in your soil that plants are used to being around, okay? So it makes the plants very comfortable to have these other living things around them because it's what happens naturally in nature. So basically, by putting this in there, what you're doing is you're seeding and you're giving, you're starting this whole process of this kind of consortium of beneficial bacteria and beneficial funguses that are going to give your plants a huge advantage. So unless I forget, I use this stuff every time. I mean, whether I'm planting flowers or shrubs or trees, or vegetables, I use it all the time because it gives the root system a huge advantage. So when you're putting young plants in, they're at a bit of a disadvantage because if you're buying young plants, you're buying them in a little container, right? And so if you had planted that by seed and it was that same age, those roots would have already been spread out, right? But no, they're in that tight little cylinder or that little square shape. And so what you want now is for those roots to grow and expand as quickly as possible because it is literally coming out of winter a race to the finish before the heat of summer comes on. It really is, okay? So we want our plants to grow as quickly as possible, mature as quickly as possible before it's like 90, 95 and plus with the heat index and then with all the moisture and rainfall that we have. And I'll explain why that's a factor here in a minute. So coming out of winter, we're going to have a couple things to consider. So if you're growing things in the winter, right, and you have all these beautiful greens and you have broccolis and cauliflowers and beets and carrots, there's a lot of things that we grow in the winter that we don't grow in the warm season. And you have one box, you're going to have to make a decision because if things are still doing well and you're still harvesting from that, but it's February and it's time to start getting things ready for spring, you're going to have to sacrifice something, right? It's a very hard decision to make. And so if you have one bed and you have all these beautiful greens, and like right now I'm still harvesting cilantro and I'm harvesting dill and I got all kinds of winter lettuces and things that I'm harvesting, but I also want to grow things for the spring and summer too. So two objects can't occupy the same space at the same time. So you're gonna have to bite the bullet. So that's why having two beds is nice in a way. So you could maybe sacrifice one of the beds to get some of your spring stuff started. Keep harvesting until you can't anymore in your second bed, and then once that starts to wane, then you do like a second planting of things for the spring and summer, so then you kind of have a staggered timing of your planting, so you have a staggered harvest as well. But there are going to be those kinds of decisions to make because you can't have your spring stuff starting where you have your winter stuff at the same time. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's why eventually I turned my whole backyard into a vegetable garden because I couldn't stand like pulling out plants that were still providing me food. So then I'd add another bed and then another bed and then another and then another. And I actually, because I did it such a large scale, I didn't do boxes. I just ordered 40 cubic yards, which is a big dump truck, a big like industrial dump truck full of compost. Had it dumped in my backyard and we had a big party. We had like 10 or 12 people over. It was a requirement that everyone brought a wheelbarrow with them. And we had a vegetable parties, a garden party, and where all my friends came, we made all the rows. So we made these mounds that were 20 feet long by 4 feet wide. But when measured, what was nice is we made the mounding, is it actually had 6 feet of length because of the mound, which was really nice. So actually it was kind of 6 feet of plantable space. So I'd plant on the sides and along the top. So I had smaller growing plants growing kind of up the arc of the mound, and then all the stuff in the center as well. So it gave me a lot of growing space. But I couldn't, the whole reason why I took it to that level eventually is just because, number one, I want to see just how much food I could grow in a small space. And sometimes I just get OCD and I get really excited and I just want to like do a giant experiment. But you will find, and I guess the reason why I'm bringing this up is that if you become successful at this, and it just takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of fortitude, and an ability to learn from your mistakes, right? And not trying the same things over and over and expecting different results. You got to be flexible, and whether you make mental notes or literal notes or digital notes, but it is good to make notes each season and kind of self-correct and then be flexible. So you may find very quickly that if you start with one pot, very soon you're going to want to have a second pot, and after that you're going to have a third pot, and after that you're going to want the 4x8, and after that you're going to want 2 4x8s, or you're going to want whatever. But just keep in mind, if you are going to do multiples, no wider than 4, because you don't want to create these beds that you have to get into, because part of the beauty of this is not compressing the soil, and by having to get into a bed. So if you made like a 10x10, you're not going to be able to reach it from the outside, right? So 4 feet is nice, and especially because you can get all around it and you don't have to actually get into the bed to work the bed and to harvest and to take care of the plants. So 4 feet is kind of the sweet width for that. But you can make them in all kinds of shapes. I mean, you can make like an L shape, right? That's 4 feet wide. I've seen horseshoes, I've seen like the letter M, so you have a middle one, the 2 sides, and they all kind of are connected. I've seen all kinds of different configurations that you guys can get really creative with how you do this. But I will say, if you are going to dive in and start creating boxes, just kind of think out that you might want more than one, so put it in a space to where you can expand, because once you start doing this and once you start harvesting your food, especially if you've never done this before, it can get kind of addictive. When you're pulling food out of your own garden, it's very nice. If you have never grown a carrot and pulled it out, rinsed it off, and eaten it right out of the ground, carrots don't taste better than that. The fresher they are, and that's true for all your vegetables. I mean, that's the beauty of growing your own food, is that the flavor is so much better the sooner you eat it right after harvest, okay? It also has more nutrients, and that's part of the reason why it tastes better, because those nutrients are still in there, right? Liquid food, whether it's conventional or organic, is immediately available to the plant, okay? This is crucial. No matter what kind of gardening you're doing, whether you're doing house plants or vegetables outside or tropicals or orchids, or it doesn't matter, liquid food is immediately available to the plant, okay? Because it is in a small enough form that the roots can absorb it as it's passing by, and as that liquid and that solution is in the soil before it dries out, okay, it's going to be there for a while, so the plants can get it right away. And this is important for a lot of reasons. So when I mentioned earlier that it's a race to get things as mature as possible before summer, I wasn't kidding. It is so crucial, because if your plants aren't mature by summer, you're probably not going to get a harvest at all, okay, because it's so hot. And a lot of these plants do not like our temperatures here, I guarantee you. And you'll find out very quickly that you can do everything right, and it's 95 degrees, and your plants are just like, no, I'm not going to do it. I would rather die, and many times they do. And many times they do. Would you want to sit out there in that 95-degree heat all day? I mean, just imagine what the plant's feeling like. And these, like tomatoes is everyone's favorite, right? Tomatoes evolved in the mountains of Central America at a high altitude, right? A much crisper climate, not as wet and muggy, and much cooler. And here is like, it's like hell for them in the summer, okay? It's like literally like the exact opposite of what they want. It's wet, it's really hot, and then we have a host of pests here that they don't like. So if you can't get your tomatoes mature before summer, I mean, you might as well just tear them out and put in some sweet potatoes and just grow sweet potatoes all summer. And we'll talk about that, because sweet potatoes will pretty much grow on their own. So let's go back to coming out of winter, because this is where we're at now. And actually, I should be teaching this class in January, but if I did, nobody would come out. So we're doing it now. So this could be for next year, okay? Because we're technically a little behind the 8 ball, unless you're starting with mature plants, okay? So if you buy seedlings now, you're still in the window of opportunity. But if you're trying to plant seeds now for a lot of these things I'm going to talk about, it's too late. You're not going to get them to mature. So coming out of winter, I will start my tomatoes and my peppers, and the things that take a long time to mature, I'll be planting those end of January and beginning of February, okay? I plant them in little cups. So I'm not planting them in my bed, because that's where all my lettuces are, and all my beets, and all my carrots, and all my Swiss chard, and all my spinach, and all the things, and the broccolis, and the cauliflowers, and the Brussels sprouts, the things I'm growing in the winter. So I'm starting them in little cups. This is crucial. So you're starting your plants for the spring in little cups, so they can be growing simultaneously as to what's growing in your bed. Now you have to be willing to protect them from frost, okay? So you want to have them in trays or something, or something you can carry, or you can cover them with frost cloth or with sheets or blankets or whatever you want, but you need to protect them from frost, because if they're exposed to frost, they will die, okay? So being willing to protect them is super important. Now, as they're growing, you need to water them and you need to feed them, okay? So you're treating them kind of like you would if they're in bigger containers. Now, if they're growing really well and they're growing above and beyond what that small little cup can hold, you might even then want to bump them up into a slightly bigger container, okay? So here at the garden center, we have empty plastic containers. So when we go out and we do jobs, we keep those containers, we stack them up, we put them in the back, and we sell them for like 10 cents or something like that. So if you do need to bump things up, we do have different size containers that you can do that, and we sell them for really cheap. If I don't have them the day you come, I can get more because our landscape company has thousands of them, the landscape side at their other property, and I can have them transferred over here. I can get more containers in for you. But they're relatively inexpensive, and you can continually bump the plants up until it's time to put them into the vegetable garden, okay? But if you are planting seeds now, I mean, some of these tomatoes can take like 80, 90 days to mature. Where does that put us? Yeah, when they're maturing, and that is awful, okay, for them, because not only do they not like that, and not only is that not the ideal temperature for them to be making their fruit, once it gets above 90 degrees, tomatoes, for example, will literally pause doing everything. They pause. They literally have a button somewhere inside of them that they pause, and you'll have green tomatoes that'll sit there for months. They won't even ripen. Like, they're not even sending the chemicals there to ripen them. They're literally holding on for dear life. They're going into survival mode. So tomatoes are one extreme. And other plants won't do that, but tomatoes literally will pause everything and just chill and try to hold on so they can survive. Peppers, they'll continue to make throughout the season. They like the heat, okay? They like it. They evolved in a different place where the heat is not an issue. So your peppers, they'll rock all through the summer. Eggplants can rock all through the summer. Okra can rock all through the summer. Green beans to some extent. You should definitely try green beans. They are an ego booster. If you've never grown green beans, they'll make you feel good about yourself because they grow pretty well on their own, even with benign neglect. I mean, you're still going to need to water them, but they are one of the easier things to try. And those are generally planted by seed because they're really big seeds and they grow pretty quickly. So you're not going to generally see them in little cups. I mean, it's rare that you might see beans in cups at any store that sells seedlings. So generally packets of seeds are the best way to grow beans. Cucumbers we also plant by seed too. So your cucumbers and beans, I'll be planting those more toward the middle, starting toward the tail end of February. So I started those in cups several weeks ago. They germinate rather quickly and they grow rather fast, okay? So back to the liquid food. So you're starting your tomatoes and sometimes your peppers in the end of January, beginning of February. You're getting those started. You're bumping them up if you need to. You're keeping them fed with a liquid solution of whatever you choose. And I generally feed every week, all right? Because this is a race to summer, I want to use whatever fertilizer I choose as directed and as often as it says I can use it. So every formula that you see out there, every liquid fertilizer might be slightly different, so just read the packaging. If it says you can use it every 7 days, use it every 7 days. On your day off, just make it a ritual, part of your routine. Feed, 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 feed. More is not better. So if it says 1 teaspoon or 1 tablespoon per gallon, use 1 teaspoon and 1 tablespoon per gallon, because the people who put this together and who formulate it know what they're talking about, and we don't know better than they do. Trust me, I have hurt plants, especially when I use conventional fertilizers. I'd say, oh, maybe 1 or 2 extra scoops because they'll grow that much faster. No, it can actually burn them if you're using the conventional fertilizers. So just be really careful. These things are awesome. This is like one of my favorite tools in the garden, okay? And I'll explain why. I use it for fertilizer, and because I'm doing organic gardening, I'm not mixing or having a lot of different chemicals in here, so I don't have to be real careful. I don't use Roundup, and I don't use like pesticides, and sometimes there's like you don't want to have like chemical residues from different things in there. So because I'm using organic stuff, even if I don't like clean it out spick and span with soap and water, nothing's going to hurt and nothing's going to like contradict or compound. So this is very helpful. Having one of these guys is also very helpful, okay? And even a squirt bottle is very helpful. I mean, these are 3 things I like to have in the garden. This would be for if you are scaling up and you have several beds. This really speeds up the process of feeding your plants. Also, if you're going to apply some organic pest control or organic fungus control, or even if you're using conventional stuff, this is just going to speed up the time it takes to do that, okay? So these are very handy. You can mix the solutions in here, fill it up to water. The instructions will be on here. You fill up to water to a certain point, attach it to your hose, squeeze the trigger and spray. It's really simple. If you're doing it on a small scale, I think this is probably the best. These guys right here, they're relatively inexpensive, they're easy to use, and you can do the foliar feeding. So plants love to get nutrients through their leaves. It doesn't necessarily happen in nature, but this is something that we can do, to help our plants. So plants absorb mostly, they absorb their food in the soil, right? And they move it up through the plant and they bring it to the top of the plant. They bring the food to the top of the plant. So what we're doing by spraying the foliage is we're putting the food right where it wants it. So you're like, well, how do the leaves absorb it? Well, leaves have microscopic holes on them, and they're called stomata, and that's where oxygen comes out. Okay, we know that plants give us oxygen. Well, those little holes can also take things in because they take in carbon dioxide, right? Plants take in carbon dioxide. So as that process is happening, it's generally during the cooler parts of the day, the stomata will open, and it happens during the coolest part of the day because they will lose less moisture when it's cool as opposed to this happening when it's hot. So they'll close up and tighten up when it's hot to seal in the moisture inside themselves. In the coolest part of the day is when they're doing a lot of that gas exchange, all right? So we can take advantage of that, spray that liquid on there, and the plants will suck in with the carbon dioxide, they'll suck in that nutrient. So you're giving your plants a huge advantage. You're putting the food where the plant wants it, and it'll speed up the growing process exponentially. If you start foliar feeding your vegetables, you'll see them rocket, okay? It's really, really exciting to see plants grow fast. Especially if you're doing this once a week, well, it's crazy because you don't notice it, because if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and you're out there every day, you won't notice it. But if a period of time were to go by and you were to see like time lapse, like it's pretty exciting to see like how much quicker they grow when you're doing the liquid solutions, okay? So liquid feeding is super important. It's going to give you a huge advantage. I can't express enough how important this is, and a lot of people just say, you know what, I'm just gonna not, and then they wonder why they have mixed results. What I'm telling you here is from experience, okay? I'm not making this up. Yes, it's optional because it's a free country. You guys can do this however you want. But I'm just telling you, I have done this before and I am not making this up. You want to feed the soil and then you want to do the liquid solution on the plants, and your success rates are going to go up considerably. Now, if this is your first time to do it, there's a whole lot of other ways to screw up, trust me, okay? And there's nature. There are variables outside of your control, okay? And so that's a great segue to start talking about all the things outside of our control. So this gardening is an exercise in patience. And if you're approaching gardening, you should probably be starting from a place to where it's more like a Zen thing. This should be a meditation. Nothing should be such a big deal that it's going to just ruin your day, okay? Because I'm going to tell you what, if you're going to allow this to ruin your day, you're going to have a lot of bad days, okay? Because I have had so many tragedies over the years with plants that have broken my heart. You put so much love and so much time, at least I have, and so much energy and so many hours, especially when I got to the point where there's 1,200 square feet in production. And to come home one day, or to be gone for 3 days and come back and a whole row of cucumbers is just melted to the ground, right? It kills you. It's so sad, okay? So things that can be outside of our control. Well, sometimes it rains for a month here, like every day. We've had several years in a row where like June into July or all of July where there's like an afternoon thunderstorm every day. Okay, let me just tell you, unless you're growing water lilies, plants like to dry out in between waterings or rains. They don't like to stay wet, okay? They really don't. And I'll tell you why, because their root systems aren't designed to stay wet. Water lilies' roots and aquatic plants, they have roots that developed in water over a long period of time, so they're resistant and impervious, and they're probably a little waxier, right? And they're not as soft, those aquatic roots, and they can resist being infiltrated and turning into mush. Well, our vegetable plants don't have roots like that. They can turn into mush and they can rot, okay? So if they're staying wet, whether that's because of our daily thunderstorms or because we're out there loving our plants too much and not actually checking to see if the soil is dry, and we're just out there because, you know what, I gotta water my plants, right? Well, yes, we do, but we need to check the soil to make sure it's dry first, okay? So that's the tricky question. And every time I talk about plants, it comes down to the same question. How often do I water my plants? And the answer is when they're dry, okay? And a lot of times people think I'm being a little rude when I say that, but it's because we all want an exact answer. We all want, well, okay, tell me every 3 days and I'll do it, right? It's not always every 3 days. There's a lot of variables, okay? So gardening requires observation and interaction with our plants. I'm telling you, it's crucial. It's probably even a little more important than the fertilizer. Observation and interaction, okay? So if you build this beautiful 4x8 box and you fill it with plants and you observe it from your window inside your house in the air conditioning, and you just look at it and you're enjoying your snack or your coffee or your tea, and you're like 50 yards away from it, you're not gonna know if the soil's dry. You know, you might have it on, you might have gone all the way and put it on automatic timed irrigation. And if you have that set to go off every day, and it doesn't need it every day, you could be killing your plants, okay? So interaction and observation, up close, personal, hands-on, is really a major variable that we can control, okay? And that alone, interacting with the plants daily and checking on them is important, right? It's a living thing, like a cat or a dog or a child. You know, if you're observing all those things from 50 yards away, you're probably not gonna know if they need their diaper changed or if they're hungry or whatever. But the plants, they're a little more quiet and they're easier to forget, and they're not always on the top of our priority list. But if you want to be successful, I would say checking on them daily is important. Now, you don't necessarily have to do anything every day. But then we have those of us, like my personality type, that wants to do something every day. Like we feel like we got to do something to this plant, right? But don't. Just curb your enthusiasm a little bit and just appreciate that the plant is doing all right and it doesn't need my help all the time, okay? So you check the soil regularly. If it's dry, water it. If it's still wet, leave it alone. That's the easiest way to explain how often to water your plants. So if you're checking daily, you're gonna know frequently how often that it's gonna need. And then there will maybe be a rule of thumb, right? If you're checking on a daily for a week or two, you're gonna get a sense of how long it takes for it to dry out after you've watered it thoroughly, right? You'll start to get a sense of that, okay? And then you can start creating your own kind of routine, your own kind of pattern. But until you have that data, until you know how long it takes, you're just guessing, okay? So don't guess, actually find out. You can do that by touching it, okay? So observing and interacting is gonna send your results through the roof. Now, just because you're observing and interacting doesn't necessarily mean that you have the knowledge to know what to do with the data that you're collecting. So it's also important to read. We have the internet. There's no reason to wonder anything. You can read about peppers and carrots and tomatoes. You can read more than you'd ever want to read in a lifetime. There's so much information out there. But when you are looking for information, do try to be specific about where the data is coming from. Are these people growing tomatoes in Oregon? Are they growing them, you know, in New Jersey? Or are they in Ohio? Because it's different there, right? So you want to be looking for southern, deep south, Florida, ideally, okay, because it's a lot different here. So when you're getting advice and when you're reading about growing things, try to make sure that it's region specific, because it makes a big difference, all right? So things that we can't control are the thunderstorms. Those can cause fungal issues, all right? So there's a few things we can do for fungus. There are fungicides. There's conventional fungicides. There is only really one organic fungicide, and it's copper. Okay, copper is a natural antifungal, okay? So you can use the liquid copper. It's safe for us, but not safe for fungus. It will kill many types of fungus that grows on the plant, okay? And the funguses have a very short and fast life cycle on our plants, and so they can spread very quickly. So when I was talking about my cucumbers melting that one year, I was gone literally, I think maybe 3 days, like a long weekend, and they had some fungal spores had developed. It's called a powdery mildew is a particular one. It's kind of white, kind of powdery looking, like someone dumped baby powder all over your plants. It developed while I was gone, and within a matter of days, it wiped out, you know, my plants. And so they're fast and they're furious. So I will use this as a preventative maintenance, okay? It kind of stinks to have to put things on your plants before you even have an issue. I would say, you know, your first season, you might use it more sparingly. Just, you know, sometimes we have to learn from things going bad, you know. So maybe if you don't start out by having this in your arsenal, great. I almost encourage like this to happen to you so you can just see how important it is to have and not have to take my word for it. But the funguses on your crops can take over. So I don't know, think of it this way too. So on farms, they're usually acres, right? They're big, most of them these days. And unfortunately, there's not as many small family farms, but they're big. And so if a farmer loses 10% of his crop or 20%, there's still like a lot of crop out there. But you lose 10, 20% in your 4x8 box, that's a big hit, right? That's a big hit. And so, you know, if you have one tomato plant and that one tomato plant dies, that's 100% loss, right? So you can see how the scale of it is. You know, it can be devastating, especially if you have, you know, 4 plants in your veggie box and you can lose 4 and then it's done, you know, and you gotta wait till next season to even do anything. So, so that's why these things are important, just because, you know, when we're doing this on this scale, like every plant matters, you know, and so I have the fungicide, I use it preventatively. I know my cucumbers are gonna get fungus. I know they are, they always do. Every year they get it, every year they get it, every year. No matter what I do or don't do, they get fungus. And so the copper will arrest the development of a lot of the funguses, and they will keep it from spreading, all right? Once I see the moths flying around, and this year, unfortunately, the moths were flying around all winter. It was warm, and moths lay caterpillars, and caterpillars love a lot of our vegetables, okay? Luckily, the caterpillars, if they get in our fruit, they do share, they don't eat the whole thing. And so you can put your vegetables, if you're not squirmish, you can put your vegetables in the sink, filled up with water, and the worms will come, the caterpillars will come crawling out of the cucumbers, and they do share, okay? They're not that dirty, and they leave like 99.9% of the cucumber. They just have one little trail that they eat. So, I mean, it's not a complete loss. So you all have to decide on how you feel about that, but yeah, right. Or your friend or significant other can eat that one, right, without knowing that they, yeah. So, but I will say it's very rare to have perfect vegetables. And I'm not going to get political about this, but just know that most of our food is sprayed with so many poisons and so many things that that's the only reason why it looks perfect in the grocery store. This was not done naturally, you know, and I hate to say that, but it's not. And, you know, but you think about the alternative. We would be starving in a lot of ways, okay? Just with the way things are currently. We'd have to totally change our entire system of how we grow food. And that's an entirely different talk that I'm not going to give. But you guys can control how you grow your food, whether it's conventional with chemicals or with organic or a combination of both, okay? You all have to make your own decisions, but you are going to appreciate, if you guys really jump into this and you really try to start growing food, you're going to appreciate your farmers a lot more. You're going to say a prayer every day for our farmers because they have a very difficult job. I couldn't imagine the stress. I mean, yes, they're trying to make a living, but think about what they're doing. They're feeding millions of people. It's mind-boggling if you think about it, that there's an actual profession that we all rely on. See, we all, you know, not too long ago, all did this ourselves. I mean, just a few hundred years ago, everyone had their own farm. I mean, everyone grew their own food on their own property. Not that long ago. And now we have people that we put all this burden onto, and it's their job to do it for everybody. I mean, it's mind-boggling. So grow your own food. See how difficult it is. I'm telling you, it's going to be challenging for you to be successful, but that's fun. Don't be discouraged by it. You're going to have great successes with very minimal effort, and then you're going to have great failures with maximum effort, okay? There's a book called like The $30 Tomato. It's hilarious. It's really interesting. But you're going to spend more on that tomato plant to keep it alive than you are just going to the grocery store and buying organic tomatoes. You're just going to do it. But I insist. I got 6 new varieties of tomatoes I've never tried before, currently growing in my backyard. And I'm going to spend more time and more money on those tomatoes trying to keep them alive, just so hopefully I can get one delicious fruit so I can slice it, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and I'll just go in a corner and just eat it all by myself. I'm not sharing it with anybody. I worked so hard for that one tomato. I'm kidding. I have some hungry friends and they would eat that tomato if I turned my back. So I grow cherry tomatoes for them. But the slicers, unless I get a great harvest, I'm eating that one tomato or those 2 tomatoes. I'm so stingy. It's terrible. I hate to admit it. But I grow lots of cherry tomatoes for all my friends, and they all love them, and they don't even really think about that I'm keeping the other stuff from them. But so grow cherry tomatoes. So that's gonna be my next tip. Cherry tomatoes develop much quicker. The whole plant grows faster, and the tomatoes, because they're small, they develop much faster. So grow cherry tomatoes. They're also an ego booster. Don't try necessarily the big slice. Don't put all your eggs in that basket, but you need to practice. So get some that grow the bigger tomatoes, but always have cherry tomatoes growing too, okay? Now keep in mind, and I keep talking about tomatoes just because everyone's fascinated with them. Is anyone here not fascinated with tomatoes or doesn't like eating them? Like, everyone likes tomatoes, right? They're exciting. They're just this weird fruit that has like, think of it as like plants being very smart. They have actually enticed us to love them so much that they're even still on this planet, right? Think about how many tomato varieties there are. There are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tomato varieties. It's the same thing like plants, they seduce humans, we fall in love with them, and then we help spread their seed all around, you know, the globe, right? Orchids have done that, marijuana has done that, tomatoes have done that. There are certain plants that have gotten humans very interested in them, and now they're the most populous plants on the globe. It's fascinating if you think about it. I mean, there's like hundreds and hundreds of potato varieties. You only see 2 or 3 in the grocery store. It's crazy. But when you grow your own food, you will begin to see a lot of interesting options, okay? So I would look at, for seeds, some of the most fun seed companies are going to be Baker Creek Seeds, rareseeds.com is their website. Southern Exposure Seed Company, they're another co-op. I think they're out of Virginia. I think Baker Creek's out in Missouri. But these are places that are not only preserving seeds, but they're experimenting and they're trying new ones. And Baker Creek has like full-time staff that sends people around the globe, and they go to indigenous cultures and they learn about different foods, and they collect seeds and they bring them back and they start growing them in Missouri. And then once they have grown enough to have more seeds, and they start planting more and more and more, and then eventually they have enough to where they can start selling the seeds. So it's a really cool program, and that's why they call it Rare Seeds, because they're going out into the globe and trying to find interesting foods that we can grow in different places in the country here. So I would try one new thing every year. Experiment, have fun. Life is short. Try a vegetable that you thought you hated when you were a kid, that you haven't tried since you were 5. Try it. I guarantee it's going to be different when you eat it, when you grew it, okay? And you try it for the first time at your garden, you're like, holy crap, this is so good, right? Beets. Who doesn't like beets here? Beets, you don't like them? Grow a beet next winter. You are going to be surprised. When you take you clean up that fresh beet and you slice and eat it crunchy, it's so good. If you've only had canned beets, you've never had a beet before. Canned beets are like Jell-O, right? Don't eat Jell-O. Don't let that be your only understanding of a beet. Beets are so good, and they're so good for you, and they clean your body out. But I guarantee you, if you try beets, what I'll do is next winter I'm going to give you free seeds for beets. All right? You come in and see me. I'm going to hold. I'll hold. All right. All right. You're going to get some. You want free seeds? All right. Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah, beets are where sugar. Yeah, I mean, beets are so good. So the best way to eat beets, and we're a little bit out of season now, but you guys can go to the store and probably still find beets. You get them, and you get some carrots, and what else do you get? You get some potatoes or sweet potatoes, and you get some beets, and you chop them up all about the same size, and you get a bowl, and you get some olive oil, and you take some, and then you get McCormick's. It's called Mediterranean sea salt, or Mediterranean spice sea salt, or something like that. Just use those few words at the grocery store. You'll find it in the McCormick aisle. But it's Mediterranean spice sea salt. So it's like sea salt with all these kind of like Mediterranean spices. It's just awesome. It's perfect on top of anything. Whether you're a vegetarian or a carnivore, you can put it on anything. It's so good. But it's really good on vegetables. So then you got your carrots, your potatoes, any other root vegetable that you want, and then make sure you put beets in there. And then you get the olive oil, the Mediterranean spice sea salt, put in the oven, you roast it. Now while you're at the grocery store getting the McCormick's, you also want to get some goat cheese, okay? Then you pull those roasted vegetables out, you put them back into the container you're going to serve them in, and you put little dollops of that goat cheese on top, and it starts to melt and drizzle all over it. So amazing, so amazing. So it's like sweet and savory all at the same time. It is the best dish, and if you're having friends over, they will think you are a gourmet chef. And it's just so simple. It's so simple, okay? So what I was getting at is like try something different every year. And even if it's not a different vegetable, try a different variety, okay? So you're gonna have different results with different varieties too. So there's so many varieties out there. So when you see the seed catalogs online, or you have a paper catalog, every year try something different, okay? It's a really fun way for you to be able to not only get better at growing things, but also to find that you're gonna get different results with different types of plants as well. Okay, so we know that there's going to be some point in our garden that we're going to need some kind of fungicide. Just know that. Fungicide is going to be important to have. If you're growing things that caterpillars like, luckily we have bacteria, so you can use germ warfare. These are another beneficial bacteria. So this is Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a bacteria that attacks caterpillars, okay? Don't spray it in your butterfly garden, okay? But in your vegetable garden, we're usually a little more anti-moth than we are butterfly, unfortunately. I love them both, but I don't like the caterpillars eating my cucumbers, and I don't like them getting on my tomatoes and some of my other vegetables. So if you are having issues with, but not everyone has this issue, but having it on hand, but sometimes it can be too late by the time you find them. So the caterpillars that get into cucumbers are really, really small. And not only do they get in the cucumbers, they'll actually get in the vine as well. And when they get in the vine, they can destroy the vine, and the whole plant can wither, okay? Because they start eating away at the inside of the vine. And that began happening to me toward the tail end of cucumber season last year. I was lucky to get a really big harvest of cucumbers last year, but at the tail end, as it's kind of waning, the moths were like full on. I couldn't stay ahead of it, and I had run out of this, and I was like, I just won't get it. But it actually worked out because it was the tail end. But just know that it's like being a carpenter, and you have a tool belt, you have a hammer, you have different things to get the job done. And when you're vegetable gardening, there are going to be certain things you need to have in your tool belt. So kind of think of it that way: having the caterpillar control, having the fungus control, having your liquid fertilizer, having some kind of way of spraying it. These are all tools that are in your tool belt. This is like part of your kit. These are things that are going to help you be successful, things that are going to make it easier, and they're going to increase your success rates. I know I'm getting close to an hour. I'm going to try and get in a few more things because I could teach a whole semester course on growing vegetables. I'm trying to condense this as quickly as possible. So looking at the extended forecast is also important. So being an amateur meteorologist is kind of important. Knowing what's coming, knowing that if it rains for a couple hours, that's not forgiveness for watering your vegetable garden, because you might be surprised. So I challenge you to go outside after it rains, try and find a patch of dirt, and see just how deep that rain penetrated. You'll be surprised at how shallow it was. It can take, depending on how fast the rain's coming and how heavy it's coming, it can rain all day and we still only get like an inch. That's not very much, right? So you can think, oh, it was a rainy day, it rained. But you get that 12-inch vegetable box, and only an inch of it got watered. Okay, so just keep that in mind. That rain it's deceiving. Only reason why I'm familiar with this is because I have 1,000 plants here I'm responsible for, and I had to learn that just because it rains doesn't mean that we're not going to water our plants today. Okay, so an inch of rain is literally an inch of rain. You can look at all these containers. An inch is not going to water that pot, right? 2 inches is not going to water that pot. I mean, think about it. I mean, that's like 14 inches, 16 inches. So it would take 16 inches of rain to water that pot. It's not going to happen, so we got to water them every day in the summertime. So think about your vegetables that way. Think about your containers, your pots that way, okay? Now, if it's raining every day, every thunderstorm every day, then we're probably going to be okay, because the thunderstorms, we got a lot of volume of water coming down, right? Okay, so, but you get to get out there, and that's what that observation and that interaction is going to be all about. You're going to be interacting, and you're going to start to know by experience and by interacting with your garden what enough rain is and what not enough rain is, okay? And you're going to start to figure that out. There are diseases that plants can get, just know that. There are no cures necessarily. I mean, we don't have like antibiotics and things like that for our plants. And when plants get diseases, generally the best recommendation is that you destroy the plant, especially if you have multiples, because it can spread to other plants. So you'll go online. I mean, we could also teach a whole class on diseases. I'm not even an expert on every disease that's out there, but you'll know it. You'll start to see weird colors and weird things on the leaves. Start doing the Google search or the whatever search that you like to use. Also, a really good resource is the Duval County Extension Agency. They are full of professionals. Duval County Extension Agency, that is our local government's branch of agriculture. And you can send emails of photos of disease leaves, issues, things like that, and they can help you identify those. Very good, and they're more than happy to do so. That's the whole reason why they're there. They get paid to help people figure out problems with their plants, not just vegetables, but anything in your garden. It's an underutilized resource in our community, but the Duval County Extension Agency, they're off of McDuff. You can bring in samples over there or email samples with photos. If you get a nice crisp kind of close-up of your plants and what's going on, they'll have a dialogue with you. Because I can't cover everything all at once, I know some of you may have some specific questions, so I'm just going to start opening up to specific questions. Anybody want to ask anything about vegetables, growing, anything that I didn't cover? Let me start over here.
What direction should we put the container garden?
Okay.
Should it be facing east, south, northwest?
Okay, so sun position is important. If you can get that east, from the east to the west, so the morning sun, that's ideal. I know my vegetables would prefer to have the shade in the afternoon. So hot, you know, in the warm season. But then the tricky thing is, you know, the sun shifts to the south in the winter, so it's a little different. And not all of us have these big wide open areas, you know. But I'd say, you know, your vegetables are going to need to get at least 4 to 6 hours of pretty full sun a day. And if they can get afternoon shade, they'd be much happier. 4 to 6 hours in the morning is plenty. Yeah. Or, you know, midday or throughout the day, or, you know, everyone's position is different. But you want your vegetable to get 4 to 6 hours, and if they can get afternoon shade, you're going to have a lot more success, for sure. Because it is 10 degrees cooler in the shade, so when it's 95, it's going to only be 85 on those plants, right? And being in the shade. Yes, sir.
Going off that,
Uh-huh.
how viable would you say we could grow vegetables in apartments and like
As long as you get 4 to 6 hours, that's it. Yeah, you can be very successful in small spaces. Yeah, in containers, start with some good potting soil, and keep them fed. And as long as you get 4 to 6 hours of sun, yeah, they're gonna do all right. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a couple of questions, but they're related to the same thing. I
Yeah.
bought one of those metal 6x2,
Mhm.
3 feet deep watering troughs.
Nice.
You put wheels on it so
Yeah.
you can move it around. But because it's 3 feet deep, I was thinking about putting some of the florist styrofoam, retain some moisture,
Okay.
and some weed block on top of
Okay.
that before I put soil. Is that
Not the worst idea. No, not the worst idea. Did you drill holes in the bottom yet?
did, and
Perfect.
put
You're gonna need good drainage.
requirements on it, so
Yeah.
I won't rust.
Yeah. I'm not sure about the integrity of that stuff. Is it pretty hard?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. As long as it's pretty hard, and then you put the weed cloth down between, I think you should be all right for filler, because you don't need 3 feet. 3 feet's too
Right.
deep.
Yeah, I think I'm only going to try to put
Yeah.
a couple feet.
And you might even think about a few bags of gravel too.
Okay.
Maybe gravel, then the foam, or vice versa. But no, gravel in the bottom because it's heavier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now because it's metal, do I have to consider the heat retention?
Yeah, you are.
Should I paint it maybe?
Painting would help. Yep, painting would help keep it cooler. I definitely consider that. Yeah, metal gets really hot. So think about containers too. Okay, so that's a good question that brings up containers, because containers are a different situation, right? So containers can get hot, and when it's, you know, you walk on the sand at the beach, it's hot, and these containers, the sides of them, when it's 95 outside, they can get hot, and so the roots around the surface can get scorched. You know, so it is important to take that into consideration. Just know that that's a variable. That the pots, and they're small especially, the smaller they are, the hotter it's going to be around the edges. And if that plant's getting big, there's going to be a lot of roots around the edges, which can scorch roots and can help make them suffer a little bit, yeah. So just checking on them for watering. I mean, sometimes in containers, I water twice a day, sometimes. I mean, sometimes I'll water in the morning and I water again when I come back home.
Hanging baskets.
Hanging baskets are that way?
Did that one because I had them so they grew down. I planted plants upside down.
Right.
So they grew down from there. But
Right.
it was a continuous
Yeah.
2-3 times a day to keep them going, just because the whole thing was
Yes.
going.
So the smaller the container, the more often things are going to need watered, for sure. Yeah.
The other thing I've used in there was crushed soda cans. Crush them, put them in the
Right, and
raw
empty
sticks,
water bottles are
put them
great.
in there, and then just put a weed cloth on top of that.
Yeah,
Let
drainage.
them grow down through
Yeah,
the-
drainage is crucial, you guys. I can't emphasize that enough. So if you have oversized containers and young plants in there, put some gravel in. The empty water bottles are great. You keep the cap on. They're lightweight. They're good filler, because you only need about 12 inches. So if your container is going to give more than 12 inches, now I will take that back to where, you know, if you can keep your pepper plants alive, I mean, they can certainly use more than 12 inches, because peppers can live 2 or 3 years, okay? So I have actually kept pepper plants alive by protecting them from the frost. So I like to grow my peppers in containers so I can move them, okay? So I can protect them in the wintertime if we do have a hard frost. Tomatoes I don't mess with, because tomatoes are so viney, they're so awkward, and moving them is no fun. But peppers are more like a bush, and they're more compact. So I've actually had some peppers where I've had them alive 2-3 years, actually. And then what's nice, if you can't keep a pepper alive that long, then that spring, you know, coming out of the winter after you've protected it, it's already mature. And it is ready to make peppers, so you don't have to wait. Like, as soon as it warms up, man, all the flowers, and you get like 20 peppers. You know, it's really cool. And I like jalapenos, so they make a lot more than green peppers do at any one time. So, all right, so let's do one more tip on containers, is that the drainage, I do probably 2 to 3 inches of gravel, okay, at the bottom of containers, because what happens is if things stay wet, it rots, okay? And a lot of times that one little hole or just a couple small holes does not drain very well. And so it can get clogged up. So the gravel ensures that the water is going to flow out. So we want things to dry, yeah.
Speaking of drainage, have you ever heard of grow bags?
I have.
We use grow bags a lot on our back patio, and they're more like a mesh instead of a hard plastic.
Right.
And it allows really good drainage.
Good drainage and good airflow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
really good airflow.
look into grow pots. If you guys are thinking about doing things in containers, or at least supplementing things with containers, grow pots are really nice. I tried to sell them here. I didn't have enough demand. I couldn't sell them fast enough. So, but they are great. Not only do they allow good drainage, but they allow airflow. And actually, when roots come in contact with oxygen, with air, they divide, believe it or not. It splits them. And so you get more tips. And so farmers actually who grow trees and large plant material will actually do these mesh pots, so the oxygen can get into the root system, around the root in the soil. Yeah, it's actually a way to speed up root development. So it actually does speed up the growth as well, for sure.
What was that called again?
Grow bag, I think.
Grow bag. There's a lot of different brands, but yeah, you can look up grow bags, mesh growing bags. Air pots is another phrase for that. Air pots, because it's about airflow as well. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How similar are vegetables, fruits?
In fruits?
Fruits, yeah.
So it's a little different in that, you know, a lot of fruits and especially trees and bushes that we grow, they're perennial, right? So they live for many years, so more than a year. So most of the vegetables that we grow are an annual crop. So you'll have to be, you switch it out. But you grow fruits differently in a lot of ways. I mean, I can't even say that because, a lot of the things that we call vegetables are actually fruits. But are you thinking more of like
Strawberries, blackberries.
Right. Okay. So yeah, each one is different, and I certainly can't go into how to grow each one of them today. But yes, you're going to need to treat everything differently. All right. Just like people who have multiple children, you can't treat them all the same because they're all different personalities, right? Okay. So your vegetables, your plants, they are all different, and that's another like beginner mistake, is that we treat them all the same. Okay. So it is good to start small, learn about what that plant needs, and then add on more varieties over time, okay? Or, I mean, you can do a crash course. I mean, it's not very expensive. This is not an expensive hobby to get into, so it's not like you're out a lot if you try 6 or 7 different varieties. I mean, it's not that big of a loss, but get to know them as you're growing them. Like, take the time to learn about them. What do these plants like to grow, and this, that, and the other. And each one has a specific personality, and watering needs can be different. So if you had one of those 4x8 beds, maybe one plant's growing faster, and it might be sucking moisture out of the ground faster. That might need watering more, whereas the other plant doesn't. So you might start to notice those kinds of trends in the garden too. But when it's hot outside, that bed is going to dry out no matter how much they're taking up, right? So you're going to need to be watering every day the hotter it gets, for sure. So winter gardening is a lot easier. Let me just say that. So look forward to a winter garden. It's much more carefree. There's less watering involved, number one, because cooler, things don't dry out as quickly. And we have less pests and disease in the wintertime too. So winter crops are a lot of fun to grow, so I definitely recommend. Winter is actually a great time. When I'm done, I'm going to run to the desk, and I'm going to get out the planting calendars for you. I'm going to have them at the front desk on the side, so look for those. Start with your planting calendars and try to be kind of strict with it. And then what you're going to find is, over time, if you guys keep up with this, you're going to find that you're going to make your own adjustments, okay? You're going to make your own adjustments. You're going to learn over time what worked and what didn't work, because there's a good rule of thumb. But like, they have some of the crops on there, starting some of your winter stuff like in August or September, but like August is still something like 90 degrees in September, and trying to grow broccoli here when it's 90, what happens is it'll grow, but it shoots up. It's real stocky, real skinny, and the floret's really small because it just goes to flower. So when we eat cauliflower and broccoli, we're eating the flower buds. Everyone, I don't know if you know that, but that's what we're eating. And so what it wants to do is it wants to develop very quickly, and so it's kind of underdeveloped when it's too hot. So you kind of want that development process to take a little bit longer, and you get a stockier, bigger cauliflower or broccoli plant, and then a stockier, bigger cauliflower to eat. Yeah, or broccoli. Yeah, cool. You guys, thanks for listening. I know this was just kind of the tip of the iceberg. I am. You guys can use me as a resource. I'm here almost every day of the week. Not every day. I'm off on usually off on Saturdays. I come in for the seminars, and I'm usually off on Mondays. So I'm here Sundays and just about every other day. Pick my brain. You guys can email me. You guys can get my card. I have that in there. If you guys have gardening questions, shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to take those emails and help. And just come visit me. Take pictures of plants. So if you're struggling with something, at home, take a picture of it or whatever, bring it in, show me, and we'll see if we can't brainstorm and figure out what's going on. But it is a journey, right? And you guys are going to have mixed results no matter what you do, no matter if you do everything right or everything wrong. You're still going to have mixed results. So just take it in stride. It's okay, and just enjoy the process because it's very rewarding. I know that it's very rewarding. I guarantee it. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.